So aspect one, the newly independent aspect one on the West Coast.
I mean, we all always independent. Like that's how we start, you know? Like I started by myself, meeting up with homies, battling, and then like making friendships and start a music group. So I think everything is like that, you know? Even on a company standpoint, like you come into a company as an individual and then eventually like you mesh with that company and, you know, solidify, so.
2010 was around the time that King of the Dot, I guess, reestablished a large platform on the West Coast, because it was grind time, it had fallen apart.
I would say like maybe 2011.
Yeah,
right. 2011, there was still Bola here. There was a Bola that lushed through with grind time, with Disaster Battle, QP. He also, you know, that was that event. So that was still here, and then there was the breakup of grind time, and then slowly after that, Lush and Organic, they kind of just started speaking and building on the King of the Dot move, and that's what initially got it out here. And it was Christian 818 and Malathion, and then Lush hit me up like, yo, like, I want you to be a part of this shit, but you gotta be pit security, because motherfuckers are scared of you. And I was like, man, I don't wanna, you know what I'm saying? Like, why I gotta be the intimidator? You feel me? Like, why you gotta play me off like that? But I knew where he was coming from. Like, when you think back about it, it's like hella funny, because I'm super chill. So, you know, shout out to Lush for like really even reaching out and be like, yo, I want you to be a part of this shit in any capacity. You know what I'm saying? He could have just been like, yo, just show up and like kick it. You know what I'm saying? He actually like incorporated me onto the West Coast staff. So, in some capacity, you know what I'm saying? And then from there, Vendetta happened. There's so many rumors and like stories about it that I don't even like to go in depth with it. I just know that it was a tough time for the company. A lot of the homies were, you know, they were frustrated, and, you know, they wanted to bring me on in a bigger, you know, a bigger role or whatnot. And I took it on. It took some months to get me into the mix, and you know, everybody was just kind of skeptical about what to do. Organic was in a tough place. Avi was. Malathion was still here, really speaking on the company and really trying to keep it alive. So like, shout out to him for like even keeping, you know, the Canadians' mindsets here, you know, because the homies in Canada were like, yo, we done, like, fuck this, like, this is just too much to deal with.
They took a big hit.
Yeah, and it wasn't even, like, a lot of people blame Lush, but honestly, like, it wasn't even all Lush. Like, it takes a whole team to, like, really hold down these events, and I think it was just, like, a big error. Like, everybody makes mistakes, like, you know, and that was like Lush's time where he was like, yo, I could never have this mistake, because now he's like so professional with organization and like times, and like the battles have to be on this time, and like he's very like organized. So I think that moment really didn't define him. Like, you know, a lot of people look at it like, oh, that defines Lush as a promoter, blah, 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 on the West Coast. It doesn't at all. I think that actually gave him the opportunity to look at the setback and be like, yo, I need to go harder, you know? And that's really, you know, what happened. And I made it a point to keep him around. Like, you know, that was the homie. Like, I was at a moment like, oh, like, he shouldn't even be around, because he, you know, and I felt like all this anger towards him, and then like it really wasn't even warranted, because honestly, like, he did so much for the coast, you know what I'm saying, and like so much for LA and the Bay, you know, as far as battle rap. So I kind of even had to fall back and be like, yo, like, it's love, like, be a part of this shit still, like, let my guard down, like, let's just not fuck up again, because now my reputation is involved too, you know what I'm saying, and I wanted to keep the reputation right. So he respected that, and we wound up being best friends over this shit. Like, you know, that's one of my closest homies, you know. I'd do anything for that fool.
The West Coast, in the last 2 years or so, since that first Vendetta event, has seen a real resurgence. You know, they started with this mega event with the Cannabis versus Disaster, and then kind of had to start at the bottom floor again. And
ironically, with an event called Resurgence.
Resurgence, exactly, yeah. They know how to market.
That's
it.
right.
So it's been built up, and Bola was a mega event.
Yeah. VR2 as well.
VR2.
And shout out to Canada for allowing us to even do that event out here, because they initially wanted to make up for Blackout.
Right.
So that was a big gift. It was a big gift to give that to the West Coast, and like Organic put a lot on the line to make that happen. So that was dope too.
But what would you attribute the success of that rise back to resurgence? What would you attribute that to?
I might sound biased a little bit, but I think it's the street element. Like, you know, at the end of the day, for like, like, look at the biggest stars in the music, like it's Eminem and then like a bunch of black rappers. And the streets identify with what they're used to. You know what I'm saying? Like if I go to Compton, which is very close to here, if I go to Watts, which is close to here, all you see is minorities and tension and aggression. And the easiest way to make that shit work was to bring that element to battle rap on the West Coast. Like we've always been known for being real wordy and like nerdy, you know, and like backpacker-ish. But the counterculture of that is the street element, you know? And the pit was a big element out here on the West Coast that cats like Daylight and Active and AV and all those dudes early on were a part. That was, you know, the equivalent of Fight Club on the West Coast, you know? So,
yeah, does that footage exist anywhere?
Somebody got it.
Okay.
Somebody got it. But, you know, it's just one of those things where like these guys are like, yo, I got this footage. Fuck you guys. I'm not putting this out. This is just for me. You know what I'm saying? So like sometimes you just hoard footage. Like the Eminem fucking otherwise shit. Like I've seen it once. You know what I mean? The live time that I was there and then the one time on camera and then it just disappeared and never existed again. So, I mean, people do the same thing, but I say that to say this, like the West Coast has always had that different culture. Gang culture is a big part. That's something that like I've been around for a long time, but I don't necessarily endorse like, yo, it's good to be a gangbanger, blah, blah, blah. But I also recognize the fact that that voice is alive in LA and in California and on the West Coast. And if you don't channel that voice and allow those guys that have that voice to become prominent in something that they enjoy, they rebel against that shit and they ruin it. You know what I'm saying? And I just know that shit from being in the hood in like South Central and seeing somebody being on and everybody mad at them and they hate. You know what I'm saying? So that ideology exists. So to eliminate it, it was like, yo, we need to get the streets involved. We need to build street teams. Like everybody needs to have like equal responsibilities in booking. So Avocado, he would use his pull and like holler at Ilmac or blah, blah, blah. I would holler at whoever I had good relationships with. Lush would do the same thing, J-Pro, and we all had an equal responsibility. I was a president, so to speak, but everybody really had joint leadership, you know what I mean? Like we all had an equal voice. Like Cass would say, I had the final word on certain things, but so did Lush, so did Avocado, so did J-Pro, so did Melodion to a certain extent. So I never, you know, I never took away from that essence, so to speak, but I also paid attention to the streets. Like that sells everywhere. You know what I mean? Look at Freddie Gibbs to Young Jeezys to Gucci Manes to J's, like every demographic. Like the dope street rapper is the best. You know what I mean? 50 Cent at one time, Ja Rule, like whoever, you can just go by the history. And like Kendrick is a difference now. It's like, oh shit, like he's from Compton, but he's like progressive. And, you know what I'm saying? So you know,
it makes,
it's the balance.
The question I guess I have here is, so as you mentioned that Los Angeles has like a real like gang culture to it, and grind time didn't really have that element to it.
It didn't have any street element really, too much. It was locksmiths and like a sprinkle of Daylight, but like I said, it was the fresh coast. And the thing about the West Coast hip hop battle scene is all the good guys weren't gangbangers. Like they were like, you know, they were around gangs or whatever, but like no can do, awkwards, like those dudes that everybody passwords, like everybody could call them nerds to an extent, like, oh, they were a nerd. Like, I don't know them as nerds. Like I know No Can from 55th and Western. He's from South Central LA. You know what I'm saying? Like I know Awkward's from Stockton, one of the worst areas of California. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I think the perception of video got people to think like it was a nerd, you know, situation out here. When really, I think Lush, because he was such a hip hop enthusiast and he was really predominantly in control of the events and he has such good relationships with a lot of the freestyle battlers, he really just integrated the guys that he was close to. So you saw Dirtbag Dans and the Soul Cons and like all those type Fredos and those names that he had good relationships in the Bay, and the Dumbfoundeds and the Satires and the Alphas and the Lyric Flips and the guys that he built with down in LA as well. You know, so I think that was the first real surge, and it was right after freestyle battling, which was a big thing, and you never really saw too many gangbangers being dominant freestyle battlers because they were already structured on songs and wanted to be Death Row or Eazy-E or Bone Thugs. So LA brought that type of environment where it was like everyone that I know that wanted to be in the industry was really, they had a street sound or polish to that. And then everybody that was a free-loving, you know, type of MC was from the Bloat or the Foundation or this type of shit over here. So Lush was able to slowly integrate both. Like he brought Passwords Against Daylight and like, you know, he started seeing these ideas like come to fruition. And then when you brought Arsenal out to the West Coast, it's conceded out to the West Coast, it was like, oh shit, like these guys are that good, they could hang with us and they're from New York. Oh shit, you know? So now it's like, let's try to find out if they can freestyle. And it didn't matter anymore because of the integration. So, you know,